Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. We will discuss on accelerating reskill. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Marshall, uh, Mr. David Smith. First, I would like to give chance, Mr. Marshall.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? All right, I'm
Yes.
on. Yeah. Right. Good. So reskilling is a very important topic. I'm glad that Sharif, that you've brought this to the table. It's part and parcel of connecting with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. Reskilling means that you're creating new capabilities for workers who may not have the skill set to move forward in the new economy that's coming. And we have a climate crisis, we have a food crisis, tsunami that's coming. We have a lot of problems that are on its way. One of the ways to overcome this is to get the labor in place that can be reskilled and retrained to implement the new technologies that are coming on board, such as our pyrolytic carbon capture and storage systems. We take people who are already, let's say, in the waste management business that are maybe middle class, low level labor people and men and women, and we retrain them to operate new systems. And it goes hand in hand, by the way, with the one of the Sustainability Development Goals, which is education, and of which this forum is a part of that goal. So the World Talent Economy Forum, as we know in the past, has been successful at bringing opportunities for training women in Rwanda and training people in India. And we're moving forward to retrain people all over the world, especially in the developing world. That is a goal set that needs to be mindful and needs to be kept. It is crucial. Without people, the buy-in and the welfare of people, increasing, getting people out of poverty, and building a middle class that will be the strength and backbone of any country and any democracy, needs to be put in place. And you can do that by taking people who are not necessarily skilled or have different sets of skills and retraining them for the new technology and the new developments and the new businesses that are being created. As an example, in our system, we're retraining people that have low-level skill sets and upgrading them to be able to operate equipment. And also, we give them the opportunity to go to school, which our joint ventures pay for. And in the beginning, I must tell you, in the beginning, our mission was to say, well, we need a person who can become let's say, a mechanical engineer or in the engineering world and groom them that way. What we discovered over time is that, yes, that's important, that's reskilling, but also we need to give people their opportunity to learn what they want to learn. So if people want to get a degree in literature, whether it's Malaysian literature, Bangladesh literature, or poetry, that's okay with us as long as they want to continue to operate our systems and participate in helping creating carbon recovery and climate restoration and climate repair. That is our mission, and that's what we're doing. And so on the reskilling set, there's a lot involved. I'll let the other panelists go into it. They have more of the academic approach to it. My part is the business approach, the practical approach to actually give people the actual opportunity to get their skill sets upgraded and at the same time create good paying jobs for them where they can put and get their families taken care of, get a proper education for them and their children, and move forward. And obviously, one of the other goals is to improve health. And this does improve health, both mental and physical health.
Thank you, sir. Mr. David Smith, what you want to discuss about accelerating reskilling?
Well, Marshall always does a great job with this, but let me actually step back 1 second and I guess, per Marshall said, per my academic hat a little bit. Because if I look at reskilling is part of a bigger pie because you have the basic training that goes on in companies. Then you have upskilling, which upskilling is training individuals in the same occupation, but in a new way. For example, if automation takes over a function or in something in the industry, you're upskilling them to do it in a way that they get the new skills to handle the process change. Reskilling, though, is training individuals who have shown they have the aptitude to learn, but in a completely new occupation. So it's not just a continuation of what they were doing before. And then, of course, you have higher education, and they kind of all go hand in hand as you look at this. One of the important things, though, of accelerating uh, the reskilling is that we are in a rapidly evolving digital economy where our generations of technology is coming faster and faster every time. And that what we need to do with the acceleration reskilling is we need to overcome the toughest challenges facing the government, the global workforce today. You know, with the impact of COVID, with the impact of wars, with the impact of all of the incentives and government subsidies around COVID, and with people saying, I have income, I don't need to work now. So you have the great resignation, and now you've got the great movement of people changing jobs. It's a challenge that we need to really look at an accelerated way to reskill, because many companies cannot find the people that are required to do the work today. And this is a very important topic. You know, the pandemic and the wars and everything, it has, if nothing else, heightened the urgency to help millions and millions of workers stay relevant in the evolving global marketplace. And what it's also forced us to do, because we're having to get more from fewer people, is that the acceleration of the digital economy, the destruction in some ways of many jobs because of the changes we've made in response to the pandemic and the wars now, you know, the rise of working from home, the rise of people not going into offices, the other things we have to overcome. Uh, the rising skill gap requires that the private and the public sectors actually come together to develop a more coherent plan to help those who are threatened by these forces. And we really need to do that as we look at this accelerated reskilling. You know, just consider a couple of things that, let's go back to 2020 at the start of the pandemic. The global workforce lost the equivalency of over 255 million full-time jobs. In 2021, that increased to almost a billion full-time jobs that were lost. Uh, this loss of labor has resulted in a global GDP decline of around 5%. And so you see that really going, and it has hit genders different, countries different. You know, for example, women were twice as likely to drop out of the workforce, and they are going to need to accelerated reskilling to come back together. So many different drivers, many different constraints, but the reality is the world we live in today is a time of lifelong learning, and reskilling, upskilling is just a part of that lifelong learning. But with all the global environment situations coming together, the need to accelerate reskilling has almost never been higher. So, Shreve, I hope that helps.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Donald, what do you want to add for reskilling?
I think one of my main jobs for the last 30 years has been what David would call upskilling, because I've worked inside of organizations and basically teaching engineers new skills, like how the operating system that they use works and how to write device drivers and things like that. Um, I think there's a little overlap. I know Facebook does an amazing thing with when you come in, they tell you to forget everything you know about programming, and they put you through a boot camp to learn JavaScript the way that Facebook does JavaScript. And everybody has to go through it, no matter how well you know JavaScript. When I was in, I spent a little while just now looking through, I'm thinking a little bit about the practical aspect of it, which is how do you deliver reskilling or upskilling? I mean, how do you get somebody, how do you get these skills to people? And that's an interesting kettle of fish. Here we focus a lot on technology, so the first thing everybody would think of is computer-aided instruction. And so I spent a couple hours on Google Scholar reading papers on computer-aided instruction to find places where they've done studies where they had control groups or controlled studies, blind controlled studies. And it can work a little bit. It does have it can have significant effects. Like, for instance, Khan Academy basically works for arithmetic. It's not good for mathematics. People don't learn mathematics from it. I looked at things for dentists, for orthodontists, for all kinds of different professions that they've done these tests. And they find that what they work the best for is things where you have to remember them. And because you can go over and over it. If you go to a lecture, you hear it once, but computer-aided instruction, you have to, you get the opportunity to go over and over it. And good computer-aided instruction is very interactive and kind of fun. So you go through it and, you know, you get questions and you get activities and things like that. But the downside of there's some real downsides to computer-aided instruction. It's considerably more expensive than regular instruction. And it's static. In other words, you spend all this money and then things change and you have this computer program that doesn't change. So you have to spend the money again to update the computer program. So basically, computer-aided instruction doesn't seem like a silver bullet for this. So what happens? What can we do to teach people? When I lived in Finland, I sometimes taught courses for people who were getting retrained. And what happened in Finland, what happens is basically people just kind of age out of industries. It's very common in Silicon Valley for somebody to be an expert at one set of libraries in one programming language, and then the main programming language that people use switches. So they're not using C++, they're not using anywhere near as much as they were. The hot programming languages, JavaScript or Jazz, things like that. It's constantly changing. And so in order to stay relevant, you have to change programming languages. I don't know if that's just learning a new skill, or if that's learning, I don't know, kind of changing careers, because it's kind of a big deal to be very fluent in a programming language. But how are these people going to change? In Finland, what happens is whole industries will disappear. Nokia was the biggest employer in Finland, and now it's changed completely what it does, and it's small compared to what it was. It was, it made phones, and now it makes telecommunications equipment. It's completely different. And so in Finland, the government, education is free there all the way through the university. And the government creates courses with actual teachers that people who are out of a job because the particular type of job that they had just went away, and they have courses for those people. They retrain the people in the type of jobs that are relevant at that particular time. And where I'm going with that is that at the core, there's an attitude thing, a social attitude. And in the United States, there's an attitude which is a very individualistic attitude, which is the idea that everybody's out for themselves. We have this kind of we have this meritocracy or meritocratic thinking that is actually bullshit. But pardon my French, but education is very, very expensive. So if you want to retrain yourself when you're out of a job, you're in a pretty tough situation, because all of a sudden you're not getting paid, and the only way that you can get retrained is to spend a whole lot of money, and it's not something that's not an effective way to do it. So when I'm saying, as far as something that Marshall said, training and education are really two different things. And so this training is extremely important. I think that while you're making decisions in your life, especially when your job goes away and you have to change what you're doing, you have to figure out a new profession, you can get funneled by the government, as is done in Finland, into some place where you'll have a job and you'll be able to work, and that's a great thing. I think that you can also learn to be more creative and have a better view of the world around you. And so you can do that yourself by reading fiction, expanding your own self. So you can retrain your own self to a large degree. I worked as a software engineer at Hewlett Packard for 6 years at a time when people would say, "You work at Hewlett Packard?" I'd say, "Yeah." And I say, "Well, why don't you apply there?" And they say, "Well, I couldn't go to work there. I mean, it was the most prestigious place to work." And I never I took one computer programming class. That's all. I taught myself. And you can teach yourself a lot. It's difficult because the people that are hiring nowadays want to see that piece of paper. They want to see that master's degree or PhD or whatever like that, at least in computer science. But that's not true in every kind of thing that you can do. You look at something like a lot of things, like for instance, we just remodeled our house, and we get our carpenters by word of mouth. We don't care what their background is. We care that other people that have worked with them praise them highly, and they're easy to work with. They do a great job, etc. like that. That's how you learn how you do it. So you can find mentors and learn yourself and reskill yourself if you want to as well. So I think that the government and society needs to be dedicated. And I'll say one more thing about that is that in the United States, teachers are very low status. They're poorly paid, they're looked down on, and it's not a high status job. In Finland, it's harder to get into teacher school than it is to get into medical school. It's a very high status job. And so I think that I don't know how you could change the social organization to make things better that way. But I think the core is we have to have respect for education, because I agree with David, lifelong learning is critical. But if people look down on learning, it's hard to motivate yourself to be able to do it. So learn to love learning and you'll do fine.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall, many interesting point already we get from different speakers as you are part of industry. So what industry want from the young population?
Well, I can't speak for all industry, Sharif. I can only speak for our organization, and I believe we have a unique approach to this. Many businesses want people; they always want dedicated and smart people on their staff, and they want people who are willing to go beyond the realm of what people normally think is just a 9-to-5 job. They want people dedicated and be enthusiastic. I read a message on LinkedIn today by Elon Musk, which I thought was interesting, about that he's demanding his people to come back into the office for a 40-hour work week, and otherwise they don't need to be in his organization. But again, he's manufacturing a product and he needs people on the plant floor, otherwise he can't manufacture. So that's understandable. One of the responses to his posting was that, well, this one guy was a salesperson for him, and he says, I don't need to be in the office. I need to be in my prospect's office. That's where I need to be. So I think everybody has their role in an organization. I think that's what that speaks to. And as with regard to retraining, you need to retrain people not just in skill sets, but in the values that your business is advocating for. That's our belief. So to give you an example, our mission is climate restoration, climate repair, and to improve the quality of life and meet the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. Those are big goals. They have big impact on this planet, but we're in a big crisis right now. And so one of the things that we need with our people is to be mindful of the crisis, but not to put themselves at risk health-wise, but at the same time, devote their energies to helping solve the problems that our company is trying to solve. It's not about being an employee as much as being a team player to meet the mission. And the mission is, as I've always said, is climate repair and climate restoration. So when we do this, we're looking for people that take retraining seriously, understand that it meets their needs as well as our needs. It has to be a two-way street. If you're not helping the employee be all that they can be, as they say, then you're really not doing you're doing a disservice to them as well as to the rest of your company and the rest of your joint venture partners. So it's our opinion, and it's a humble opinion. I'm not saying that it's for everybody, but it's our approach and our mission that we train people and retrain people to be the best they can be, not just in their tasks, but understanding why they're doing what they're doing, understanding what the mission is about, and psychologically capable of meeting that mission without fear or favor towards some entity that is not helping our cause. So our mission, again, is to retrain people in the physical aspects of it, but also understand to retrain people from a mentality that a lot of people have gathered over time. And it's all cultural, as you know, Sharif. What one person might think in, let's say, Bangladesh might be different in Malaysia, but just based on culture and background and training and where they came from. But we need to give everybody an equal opportunity to be the best they can be. And that's what we think retraining can do as part of the task. But again, retraining is not just teaching people new tricks or new tasks on how to program or code or operate a piece of equipment. It's also integrating themselves into the organization, into the culture that we're creating, which is a company culture, which is a joint venture culture, which integrates itself into the culture of the country we're in. Because what you're doing in America may be totally different than Malaysia, which may be totally different than Bangladesh. We need to be mindful of that. Part of the retraining is that as well. So I just want to share with the audience out there that we need to take into our mindset that we are guests in other people's countries. We need to act like good guests, and we need to respect their traditions and their approach and their philosophies in education and outreach. So that's one of the things that we do. I can't speak for others, Sharif, as you well know. It's up to other company leaders to do what they can do. We advocate that other companies do what we do, but we don't control that. We control what we do.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith. You have experience to work with different corporations. So, what do you think actually? What the demand from the youth communities, especially those who young and those who want to join in industry?
Well, Sharif, the demands are very, very high in today's marketplace, and particularly for the youth. The youth of today's generation really are at a time where the whole concept of skills and training and education are taking on new meanings as we really go into this time of lifelong learning. Uh, if you begin to look, this is a key moment for business leaders and for the government to respond to promptly, and really a sense of urgency because of all these shortages. We're now facing a learning curve as managers and leaders scramble to lead their teams virtually. Uh, and Elon Musk's announcement was interesting because it was a blanket announcement, come back to work. And he didn't take the time to say that if you're in a manufacturing environment, you have to be there 40 hours a week. If you're doing software coding, you could do it from home, for example. So we need to make sure that our management is also reskilled with the very important things we're doing today. It's a tough time today as we bank on the social capital and the human capital on how to maintain the benefits of what we're trying to do. And because we have worked from home, worked out of the office so long, when we go back into the office, a new set of skills are also likely to emerge for this transition back to the office. So, in many ways, if we have been gone from the office for 2+ years now, do the skills I'm using at home translate to the same type of skills I'm going to use back in the office? Most likely not, Sharif. And for particularly the youth, that's really important to consider because so much of society today have a misguided approach that if I learned it one way, uh, I'm not going to need to go and do it another way. Um, and that is often the type of things. And the today, McKinsey has said that AI and automation will displace between 400 and 800 million individuals by 2030, which is 1/5 of the workforce. Uh, and that 1/5 of the workforce is going to need to reskill and do it without saying. But even as we look at new things, I love the comment earlier about the different approaches. Uh, as you know, because I've mentioned it before, one of our portfolio companies is a company named Universal Tutor. And Universal Tutors using conversational 3D avatars to begin to help teach new skills. In Universal Tutors' view, it's particularly in social emotional learning. And the pandemic, the global environments of today, the great resignation of people are forcing us not only to learn new skills, but new social and emotional approaches that we can balance in business, particularly as we move into what is the new business world post pandemic. What's the new business world as we rebalance our global assets? One of the outputs from the pandemics is that we saw that concentrating manufacturing capability, for example, in one region, one country, doesn't work because of global disruptions. So part of this accelerated need for reskilling is as countries decide, I'm going to bring back into a region manufacturing capability. I'm going to bring back into a region strategic capabilities that the region hasn't had for a while. And so if I'm, Sharif, the youth you mentioned, we're at a very important inflection point for them because their opportunities today are at an all-time high because of all these changes. And their mindset has to be, though, is I'm going into a job that won't be the same in 3 years as it is when I walk in the door today. And because of that pace of change, they need to realize that even in a new job, you need to take the opportunity to do lifelong learning. You know, look at current awareness courses, either in person or online, looking at boot camps. Many of the large companies, and mine included, we're encouraging employees to do a boot camp in the evening. You know, we'll even pay for the fees of some of the boot camps to enhance their fees, their skills and capabilities. With that type of accelerated reskilling, I just go back to the term lifelong learning because it encompasses reskilling, upskilling, training, and education altogether. Those are the components that are necessary for companies to compete today, and for the human capital, the people in the companies, they have to maintain those capabilities for the companies to be successful and for the individual to be successful. So Sharif, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Donald, very interesting discussion. So, what is your advice for the students of Asia?
Yes, it is interesting. You know, one of the things that we that's here in this discussion that we haven't really brought to the fore, something that's very important to me, which is learning how to learn. And I'm not sure that's easy to, that's difficult to teach, because that's attitude as well as knowledge. I think to the extent that something like social emotional learning that David's doing is effective, that might be an adjunct that could help with it. I'd like to see how effective that is. I've been, as I said, I've been looking at peer-reviewed studies and trying to understand how effective that online learning is. The point that I'm trying to make is that we need to learn to be skeptical. And I mean skeptical in the philosophical sense, which is that we need to learn that when we hear something, we really don't know it's true. Even if we hear it from Albert Einstein, if we hear it from the most respected professor that we have, we need to learn that we don't know if something's true. And we're bombarded right now with information that's not true. I think Elon Musk is a good example. I've been reading on him. The reason he's asking everybody back is because he's kind of a nutcase autocrat, and he's not a good guy. So yeah, that's the reason. It's because he's a control freak, but he's really good at marketing himself. The co-founder of Dodge, what was the company he started, Dogecoin, just came out the other day and said that he was a grifter and had no idea. He gave him a Python script and he had no idea what it meant or how to run it. though he claims he's an engineer who knows stuff like that. It's just not true. That's, neither here nor there. But what I'm saying is, for lifelong learning, we have to learn to be like scientists, or there's a field called critical theory, and it's basically trying to look at, in this case, literature, and asking questions about it, trying to understand what the person is saying in a context, so that you go beyond the words, you go beyond what they're saying, and you get inside of it and understand what they're saying from the place that they're coming from. And lifelong learning, or learning in general, is about listening. And the question is how, the question from that statement is, how do you learn to listen? And perhaps David's software helps with that, but it's a social skill. And the way to learn to listen is to have respect for other people. Like, there's a homeless guy that I pass when I'm walking to the grocery store, and a lot of people just put their heads down and hurry past homeless people, but I don't. I smile at them, and sometimes I talk to them and stuff like that, because they're human beings. And one once said, he said, hardly anybody does that, and it makes my whole day. Thank you. And I just got talked just today, after all this time that I've known him. He told me that when he was 19 years old, his mother was hit in a car and died in a car crash, and hit by a car as a pedestrian. And he was, she was a single parent, and he was left alone. And he got some insurance money. At 19 years old, he, basically lost it. And that's what happened to him. And so he isn't stupid. He just had this incredible trauma happen to him, and incredible bad luck. And I know that isn't a story that's going to get you a new job or something like that. But I've sat down next to people on airplanes who have given me contacts that have been very, very valuable to me. In fact, right now I'm working with a group called African Trade Network. And so I went and I looked on Google for companies that invest in Africa. And I found a list of companies that invest in Africa from the Hunt Club. Well, damned if I didn't sit next to the guy, one of the people from the Hunt Club, on an airplane. He gave me his card, so I can call him up or email him. The opportunities that you're going to find are from other people, and so everybody can teach you something. Everybody. So if you really want to do what David says and do lifelong learning, you got to listen, and that's what I have to say.
Thank you. This is really great session, and we learn a lot from different people from different perspective. Mr. Marshall, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, Sharif, I think that listening to Donald, and I'm listening, Donald, I hear you. I think you made some very astute observations, and so has David in this forum. And I agree with with both Donald and David. I'm not advocating the leadership qualities of Elon Musk. Far from it. I just brought him up as an example.
Yeah, I know.
But the point is, I brought him up as an example of that. That's not what we do. In fact, we're doing the opposite. If people can work wherever they're comfortable, that's what counts. It's part of the ability for the mindset and the psychology and the sense of help and comfort level that an employee requires to be able to contribute to the team effort. And we have to understand that not everybody's going to be productive all the time. That's an expectation that I think that is overrated and not realistic. And we also have to take into account that people are, as Donald pointed out, this homeless fellow that he meets on his way to the store. It took him a long time to connect with him, but he did. And what did we learn? We learned that the fella went through trauma. That's how he ended up in this world of being homeless. So that's a very relevant story to retraining. How would you take someone like that and give them a new skill set? How would you give them a new opportunity to work in a job? How would that occur? That's what came to my mind, Donald, when you brought this fellow up. And I think there is a way to do it, but I don't think it's easy. And I don't think anybody should think it's easy. I think it's something that needs to be thought about and need to be planned for, because there are many homeless people out there. And we need to create viable human beings to operate in their world and get off the homeless part and give them a new life and give them a life of opportunity. And I totally agree with what Donald said, that we should listen more and talk less. The good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we have 2 ears to listen more than to speak. So I think that's a telling feature right there for humanity. Again, we are caught with people who are traumatized. We're caught with people who are creating trauma for others. And we need to take that into consideration in all the actions that we do, in all our behaviors. So retraining is not just about giving somebody a new skill set. If you train this homeless person to do something, he may not even implement it. The question is, what do we do? It's a holistic approach. What do we do to bring this person back into the human family, to be productive, to contribute to not only his own well-being, but to the well-being of others? That's what we're faced with right now, in a manner of speaking that we haven't been faced with since World War II at this level. World War II was a world war. People were being killed by the tens of millions, the hundreds of millions in the war, at that war. We're experiencing that right now. In the United States alone, just from the pandemic alone, we've lost 1 million people from a disease. How much of that could have been prevented? No one will ever know. The point is, can we prevent it in the future? What can we do to give people their skill sets and their capabilities to participate and the desire to participate in this new world? We are, again, having a world famine that's approaching us like a tsunami wave. I already heard, and I think I mentioned on yesterday's program, that in California alone, there is a water crisis, and the farmers that are planting seeds out west, they don't know if they're going to be able to grow the crops that they are already harvesting now. So this may be the last harvest before people suffer worldwide, because California contributes to world grain and world things, just like Ukraine does. And Ukraine and Russia are in conflict. So we're having a conflict that is exacerbating human suffering around the world because of the climate crisis and because of the insanity of war. Just that's what it is. It's total insanity. But that's human condition. We are built with insanity as well as sanity. So we need to educate people. We need to take from Donald's page book to go out and talk to the people, engage with them. Doesn't mean they're going to be your friends, but at least you can try to communicate. Communication is the key. Listening is the key. 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen more, talk less, and engage. That's my concluding remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for your great advice. Mr. David Smith, what's your concluding remarks for today's session.
Uh, Thank you, Sharif. My concluding remarks really are ones that I go back and I'll reinforce some of the points we've made before, is that uh, because of digitalization, because of AI, because of robotics, because of the the war and its impact globally, particularly on the supply chain, uh, because of COVID and COVID's ripples, not just the disease, but the steps governments and companies have taken to combat it, we're at an all-time inflection point for reskilling, retraining, um, and there the with so much movement. One of the statistics I always surprises me that when you have a new hire come into a company, it costs the company between $4,000 to $10,000 just to train that employee in a new company in the things. In some of the companies, like Donald mentioned earlier, the cost is higher if you want to teach them that way of doing JavaScript, for example. So this movement is one that is very important at time. And we see the future really coming. There's a need to reskill and enable individuals and companies to learn new marketable skills. This is going to be a critical challenges. And for particularly poorer nations, it's a sweeping challenge. But what's very interesting when I look at developed versus developing nations. Uh, for the developed nations, the share of the workforce that may need to be reskilled and find new occupations is even higher than in developing nations. For example, nearly half the people in Japan and up to one third of the workforce in the United States and in Germany, recent surveys have said need to be retrained. And so this is not a issue that is restricted to any one nation, any particular type of nations. Uh, our traditional academic environment has been out of touch with the need to do this dramatic accelerated reskilling, which is unfortunate. Uh, but even many of the academic institutions were really impacted by COVID, and they have not put in place how they're going to transform. Now, you hear about transformation in business. We need transformation in education and government as well, because this whole accelerated reskilling, I would love to see it applied to all the members of a legislative body. You know, one of the debate topics we should do on a Friday is, what does it take to reskill the people in the legislature? What does it take to reskill the people who are in the government bureaucracy who resist change when change is accelerated today? And those are the things that cause the accelerated reskilling today to be such a critical milestone that has to be tackled and that has to be accomplished today.
Thank you. Thank you. This is excellent discussions. I think Mr. Donald, we
We
I'm
lost
missing
them.
him. Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry about that. But this is really great discussion. Especially, it's a great content for youth. And World Talent Economy Forum actually working with the youth for developing their skill, developing a knowledge-based society, and especially your support every day, how you contributing for World Talent Economy Forum. It's become very helpful for the youth community in Asia. Hopefully, with your guideline, advice, our youth community can create more valuable things for their society, for their country. Thank you, Mr. Marshall and Mr. David Smith, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Thank you, Sharif. Thank you, David.
Thanks, and bye bye.
Bye bye.